A gunshot echoed across the plains as Nora Davenport fled through the darkness, her heart pounding wildly against her ribs like a trapped animal fighting for its life. The crisp autumn air of 1875 Colorado burned her lungs as she pushed deeper into the wilderness, away from the small mining town of Silver Creek, where everything had gone so terribly wrong. Behind her, voices called her name, not in concern, but in anger, with promises of justice that would be anything but fair. Nora's dress was torn at the hem from her desperate escape, her once neat chestnut hair now falling in wild tangles around her face. The meager belongings she'd managed to grab were clutched against her chest, a small bag containing all that remained of her former life. 23 years old, and now a fugitive, running from a crime she hadn't committed. As dawn broke over the mountains, painting the sky in hues of gold and pink, Nora's exhausted legs finally gave out. She collapsed beside a small stream, her reflection showing a face she hardly recognized, dirt-streaked, with eyes wide with terror. She dipped her trembling hands into the cool water, washing away the dust of her flight, but not the memories of the previous night. Sheriff Holden had found the bank manager dead in his office, shot through the heart. The same bank manager who'd been forcing his attentions on Nora for months, threatening to have her brother's loan called in if she didn't comply. The same man she'd publicly threatened just days before, when he'd cornered her behind the general store. The sheriff had found her handkerchief beside the body, embroidered with her initials planted there, though she had no way to prove it. "I'll hang for a murder I didn't commit," she whispered to the rustling trees, tears cutting clean paths through the grime on her face. The sound of approaching hoofbeats sent Nora scrambling for cover. She crouched behind a large boulder, holding her breath, as a lone rider came into view. The man sat tall in his saddle, his face partially obscured by the wide brim of his hat. He dismounted smoothly and led his horse to the stream, just feet from where she hid. Nora's foot slipped, dislodging a small shower of pebbles. The man's head snapped up, his hand moving to the revolver at his hip with practiced ease. "Come out," he commanded, his voice deep and steady. "I know you're there." Seeing no choice, Nora slowly stood, her hands raised in surrender. "Please," she said, hating the tremor in her voice. "I mean, no harm." The stranger studied her for a long moment. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with a face weathered by sun and wind. His eyes, a startling shade of blue, held none of the cruelty she feared. "You're running from something," he stated rather than asked, taking in her disheveled appearance. "They say I killed a man," Nora replied, chin lifting slightly despite her fear. "But I didn't." The man's eyes narrowed slightly. "You're the Davenport woman, from Silver Creek." Nora took a step back, ready to flee again, but he raised a hand to stop her. "Easy now, I'm not with the law." He removed his hat, revealing dark hair streaked with premature silver at the temples. "Name's Ryan Irving. I was in town yesterday when they found Harrison's body." "Then you know they think I murdered him," Nora said, her voice hollow. Ryan nodded slowly. "I know the sheriff's got it wrong. I know the truth, Miss Davenport, and I'll protect you." Nora stared at him, suspicion warring with desperate hope. "How could you know anything?" "Because I saw someone leaving Harrison's office last night, and it wasn't you." Ryan approached slowly, as one might a skittish horse. "I was staying at the hotel across the street. Couldn't sleep. Saw a figure slipping out the back door of the bank well after midnight." "Who was it?" Nora demanded. "Couldn't see clearly, but it was a man, tall and heavy-set. Not a woman, that's certain." Ryan gestured to his horse. "Sheriff Holden's forming a posse. They'll be heading this way by noon." "We need to move." "We?" Nora repeated, still wary. Ryan's expression softened slightly. "You won't last long out here alone, Miss Davenport. I've got a small ranch about a day's ride north. You can stay there until we figure out how to clear your name." "Why would you help me? You don't know me." "I know enough," Ryan replied simply. "I know Harrison was no saint. Plenty of folks had reason to want him dead." He extended his hand. "Do you trust me enough to come along, or would you rather take your chances with Holden's posse?" Nora hesitated only briefly before accepting his outstretched hand. "I don't have much choice, do I, Mr. Irving?" A ghost of a smile touched Ryan's lips as he helped her mount his horse. "Call me Ryan, And there's always a choice, Miss Davenport. I'm just offering the one that doesn't end with a noose. They rode hard through the day, stopping only briefly to rest the horse and take small sips from Ryan's canteen. Nora sat behind him on the saddle, her arms wrapped tentatively around his waist. The unfamiliar closeness with a man she'd just met would have scandalized her mere days ago. Now, it seemed the least of her concerns. As the sun began its descent behind the mountains, painting the landscape in fiery hues, Ryan guided his horse off the main trail and into a densely wooded area. They followed a barely visible path for another hour before emerging into a small clearing. A modest cabin stood among a cluster of pines, smoke curling from its chimney. "Someone's here," Nora whispered, tensing behind him. "My ranch hand, Miguel," Ryan explained, dismounting and offering her his hand. "He's trustworthy." The door to the cabin swung open, and a lean Mexican man stepped out, rifle in hand. Upon recognizing Ryan, he lowered the weapon. "Senor Irving," he called, then his eyes fell on Nora. "You bring company?" "Miguel, this is Miss Davenport. She'll be staying with us for a while." Ryan's tone made it clear that no further explanation would be forthcoming. "She's had a rough journey. Could you prepare something to eat?" Miguel nodded, disappearing back into the cabin without question. Ryan led Nora inside, where a fire burned cheerfully in the stone hearth. The interior was simple but comfortable, a far cry from the refinement she was accustomed to in her father's home, but welcoming nonetheless. "It's not much," Ryan said, watching her take in her surroundings. "But it's safe. It's more than I deserve," Nora replied softly. "Thank you." Miguel brought them a simple meal of beans, cornbread, and coffee. Nora hadn't realized how hungry she was until the food was before her. She ate gratefully while Ryan and Miguel spoke in low voices across the room. After dinner, Miguel took his leave, heading to a smaller structure visible through the window, apparently his own quarters. Ryan showed Nora to a small room off the main living area. "You can sleep here," he said, lighting a lamp on a bedside table. "I'll take the chair by the fire." Nora glanced at the narrow bed, then back to him. "This is your room. I can't take it." "You can and you will," Ryan insisted gently. "You need proper rest." As he turned to leave, Nora caught his arm. "Why are you doing this? You're risking everything to help a stranger accused of murder." Ryan was quiet for a moment, his eyes studying her face in the soft lamplight. "I've seen what happens when innocent people get caught in the machinery of rushed justice, Miss Davenport. Sometimes all it takes is one person willing to stand up for the truth." There was a story there. Nora sensed a personal one, but exhaustion was quickly overtaking her, and she lacked the strength to pursue it. "Thank you," she said again, inadequate though the words seemed. Ryan nodded once before closing the door behind him. Alone in the unfamiliar room, Nora sank onto the edge of the bed. The events of the past 24 hours crashed over her like a wave. She was a fugitive, miles from home, dependent on the mercy of a man she'd just met. And yet, for the first time since she'd heard Sheriff Holden's accusation, she felt something close to hope. Sleep claimed her quickly, but it was restless and filled with dreams of pursuit, of faceless accusers pointing fingers, of the hangman's noose swinging in a cold wind. She awoke with a start just as dawn was breaking, momentarily disoriented by the unfamiliar surroundings. The events of the previous day came flooding back, and with them, the grim reality of her situation. She was still a wanted woman, regardless of the temporary sanctuary Ryan Irving had provided. After washing her face in the basin provided, Nora ventured into the main room to find Ryan already awake, stoking the fire. He glanced up as she entered, a coffee pot warming on the stove beside him. "Good morning," he greeted her. "Sleep well?" "As well as could be expected," Nora replied honestly. "What happens now?" Ryan poured coffee into 2 tin cups, handing one to her. "Now we figure out who really killed Harrison and why they're trying to frame you for it." "How do we do that from here?" Nora asked, wrapping her hands around the warm cup. "Miguel will ride into town today for supplies. He'll listen to the gossip, see what's being said." Ryan sat at the small wooden table, gesturing for Nora to join him. "In the meantime, I need you to tell me every interaction you had with Harrison, anyone who might have seen or known about your conflicts with him." Nora sat across from him, her fingers tightening around her cup. It started about 6 months ago, after my father died. We discovered he'd taken out a substantial loan from Harrison's bank to keep his store afloat during the mining slowdown. My brother Thomas and I were trying to make the payments, but business remained slow. She paused, finding it difficult to continue. Ryan waited patiently, his expression encouraging. Harrison began to pay special attention to me, Nora continued, her voice dropping. At first, it seemed innocent enough pleasantries when I'd make our loan payments, compliments that made me uncomfortable but weren't overtly improper. Then he began suggesting that there might be other ways to satisfy our debt. Ryan's jaw tightened visibly, but he remained silent. I rejected him, of course, but he became more insistent, more threatening. He cornered me behind the general store last week, said he'd foreclose on my father's business if I didn't comply with his demands. Nora's voice shook with remembered anger. I told him I'd rather see him dead than give in to his blackmail. Who heard you say that? Ryan asked quietly. Several people. We were just off Main Street. Nora set down her cup, distress evident in her expression. I never thought. I was just so angry. And someone used those words against you, Ryan concluded. Was there anyone specific who might have wanted to frame you? Anyone with a grudge? Nora thought for a moment. Eliza Carrington. She's been sweet on Harrison for years, despite his reputation. She's always resented the attention he paid me, though I never encouraged it. What about Sheriff Holden? Why was he so quick to accuse you? He and Harrison were close. They played cards together every Saturday at the saloon. Nora hesitated. There were rumors that they had business dealings together, outside the bank. Ryan nodded thoughtfully. Anything else unusual happened recently? Anyone new in town? There's a man who arrived about 2 weeks ago, James Wheeler. He claimed to be a cattle buyer, but I overheard him arguing with Harrison at the bank. It sounded like they knew each other from somewhere else. Ryan leaned back in his chair, processing this information. Good. This gives us something to work with. He glanced toward the window. Miguel will be leaving for town soon. I'll let him know what to listen for. As Ryan stepped outside to speak with Miguel, Nora remained at the table, attempting to collect her scattered thoughts. Her life had been upended in the span of a single night. And now her future depended on uncovering a murderer with only the help of a mysterious cowboy she barely knew. When Ryan returned, he found Nora staring pensively into her coffee. Miguel's on his way, he informed her. He'll be back by nightfall, hopefully with news. Nora looked up at him, truly studying him for the first time. He appeared to be in his early 30s, with the lean, muscular build of a man accustomed to physical labor. His face, while handsome, bore signs of hardship, a small scar above his right eyebrow, lines at the corners of his eyes that spoke of squinting against harsh sun and harsher realities. "Who are you really, Mr. Irving?" she asked suddenly. "You're no ordinary rancher." A shadow of something, perhaps surprise, perhaps appreciation for her perception crossed his features. "What makes you say that?" "You're too observant. The way you move, the way you assess situations. You remind me of the lawmen who would pass through Silver Creek." Ryan regarded her for a moment before answering. "I was a Texas Ranger for 8 years. Nora's eyes widened slightly. "What happened?" "I believed in justice," he said simply, "until I watched an innocent man hang because it was convenient for powerful people to see him dead." He moved to the window, looking out at the mountains beyond. "I couldn't wear the badge after that." "I'm sorry," Nora said softly. Ryan turned back to her, his expression resolute. "Don't be. If I was still wearing that badge, I might not have been free to help you now." The day passed slowly. Ryan showed Nora around the small ranch, the corral where he kept a few horses, a modest barn, and a vegetable garden that provided most of their food. The property was nestled in a secluded valley, with mountains rising in the distance and a small creek running along its eastern boundary. "It's beautiful here," Nora commented as they walked back toward the cabin, the afternoon sun warm on their shoulders. "Peaceful. That's why I chose it," Ryan replied. "After years of chaos and violence, I needed something different." "Do you ever miss it? Your old life?" Ryan considered this. "Parts of it. The sense of purpose, mainly. Knowing that what you're doing matters." He glanced at her. but I've found other ways to make my life meaningful. As evening approached, Ryan taught Nora how to clean and load a revolver. Just in case, he said grimly. His hands were warm and steady as they guided hers, showing her how to handle the weapon safely. I hope you never need to use it, he told her, but hope isn't a strategy. The sun was setting when they heard hoofbeats approaching. Ryan immediately moved to the window, hand on his gun, before relaxing. It's Miguel, he confirmed, opening the door as the ranch hand dismounted. Miguel's expression was grave as he entered the cabin, removing his hat. There is much talk in town, senor. The posse returned empty-handed, but Sheriff Holden has sent telegrams to neighboring counties. There is a reward now for the senorita. Nora sank into a chair, the reality of her situation hitting her anew. What else? Ryan pressed. I heard something interesting at the saloon, Miguel continued. This man Wheeler that the senorita mentioned, he was drinking heavily, talking loud. Said something about Harrison getting what he deserved before the barkeeper hushed him. Ryan's eyes narrowed. Anything about why Harrison deserved it? Miguel shook his head. But there is more. The sheriff and some men I did not recognize were meeting in a private room at the hotel. Very secretive. Could you make out any of their conversation? Only fragments, something about papers that needed to be found. Ryan paced the small room, thinking. Harrison had something they want, documents of some kind. Maybe proof of whatever illegal business they were conducting together. And they think I have them? Nora asked, bewildered. Or they're worried Harrison might have given them to you, Ryan suggested, which means they'll keep looking for you, regardless of whether they actually believe you killed him. Nora wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly cold despite the fire. So I'm in danger even if we prove I didn't murder Harrison. Yes, Ryan acknowledged, his expression somber. But we're ahead of them now. We know what they want. He turned to Miguel. Did you hear anything about Harrison's funeral arrangements? Tomorrow afternoon at the church, Miguel replied. The bank will be closed. Ryan nodded, a plan clearly forming in his mind. That's our chance. If there are incriminating documents, they'd be in Harrison's office. You want to break into the bank? Nora asked incredulously. Sometimes the only way to fight injustice is to bend the rules a bit, Ryan replied, a hint of his ranger past showing in his determined expression. Miguel, I need you to stay here with Miss Davenport. I'll ride to Silver Creek at first light. No, Nora said firmly, standing. I'm coming with you. Ryan shook his head. It's too dangerous. The entire town is looking for you. Exactly why I need to come, Nora insisted. I know the bank layout. I know where Harrison kept important papers. And besides, she added with grim determination, this is my life at stake. I won't sit by while others decide my fate. Ryan studied her for a long moment, respect gradually replacing concern in his eyes. You'll need to disguise yourself, and you'll have to follow my instructions exactly. I will, Nora promised. I'm not afraid. You should be, Ryan said softly. But courage isn't about not feeling fear. It's about facing it anyway. He turned to Miguel. We'll both need clothes, nothing fancy that might draw attention. As Miguel left to gather the requested items, Ryan sat across from Nora, his expression serious. If anything goes wrong tomorrow, you run. Don't wait for me. Don't try to help. Just get yourself to safety. I won't leave you, Nora protested. You will, Ryan insisted, reaching across the table to take her hand in his. The unexpected contact sent a strange warmth through Nora's chest. Promise me, Nora, I've chosen this risk. You didn't. It was the first time he'd used her given name, and something in the way he said it made her breath catch. I promise, she whispered, though she wasn't entirely sure she could keep such a vow. They departed before dawn the next morning, dressed in simple, nondescript clothing. Nora wore a hat pulled low over her face, her hair tucked beneath it. Ryan had procured a second horse from his small corral, a gentle mare that Nora could handle easily. Remember, he cautioned as they rode side by side through the pre-dawn darkness. Once we're in town, we don't know each other. You head to the back of the bank while everyone's at the funeral. I'll create a distraction if necessary. Nora nodded, trying to project a confidence she didn't entirely feel. How will I get inside? Harrison kept a spare key under a loose brick by the back door. Most bank managers do. Emergencies happen at all hours. At Nora's surprised look, he added, "Rangers learn all sorts of useful information." They reached the outskirts of Silver Creek just as the town was coming to life. Ryan and Nora separated as planned, with Ryan heading toward the saloon while Nora made her way to a spot behind the general store where she could watch the bank unobserved. The hours crawled by. Nora remained hidden, heart pounding every time someone walked past her hiding place. Shortly after noon, she watched as people began gathering at the small church down the street. Harrison might not have been well liked, but in a town like Silver Creek, funerals were social obligations, regardless of one's feelings about the deceased. When the church bell tolled, signaling the start of the service, Nora waited an additional 10 minutes before slipping from her hiding place and making her way to the bank's rear entrance. True to Ryan's word, she found the key exactly where he'd described. The back door opened with a soft creak. Nora froze, listening intently, but the building remained silent. Heart racing, she made her way through the darkened corridor to Harrison's private office. The room still bore evidence of the crime, a dark stain on the floorboards where Harrison had fallen. Nora forced herself to look away, focusing instead on the large desk dominating the room. She began methodically searching through drawers, unsure exactly what she was looking for, but hoping she would recognize it when she found it. The bottom drawer contained a false bottom, a discovery Nora made only when she accidentally pressed on the right spot while removing papers. Beneath the hidden panel lay a leather portfolio. Hands trembling with excitement, Nora opened it to find land deeds, maps, and what appeared to be private correspondence between Harrison and several men, including Sheriff Holden. Quickly scanning the documents, Nora began to understand. The papers detailed a scheme to force ranchers off their land by manipulating loan terms, then acquiring the properties at a fraction of their worth once the Northern Pacific Railroad announced its planned route through the territory, information the conspirators had obtained through bribery. "Oh my God," Nora whispered, recognizing the magnitude of what she'd discovered. This wasn't just corruption. It was a criminal conspiracy involving some of the most powerful men in the county. The sound of the front door opening sent her scrambling to replace the papers in the portfolio. Footsteps approached the office, heavy boots on wooden floors. Clutching the portfolio to her chest, Nora looked frantically for a place to hide. But there was nowhere in the small office that would conceal her. The door swung open, revealing Sheriff Holden himself, his hand already moving to the gun at his hip when he saw her. "Well now," he drawled, a cold smile spreading across his weathered face. "Seems like the rabbit's returned to the snare all on her own." "I know what you did," Nora said, holding up the portfolio. "You and Harrison and the others, the railroad deal, the land theft." Holden's smile faded. "Give me those papers, girl. Maybe I'll make your hanging quick. So you can continue stealing from honest people? I don't think so." Nora backed away, bumping against the desk. "Harrison got greedy," Holden said, advancing slowly. "Thought he deserved a bigger cut than the rest of us. When he threatened to expose everything, he had to be dealt with." His eyes narrowed. "You were just convenient the fiery shopkeeper's daughter who'd publicly threatened him. No one would question your guilt." "Someone will when they see these," Nora replied, trying to keep her voice steady despite her terror. "No one's going to see them," Holden growled, raising his gun. "Hand them over, or I'll take them from your dead body. Makes no difference to me." The report of a gunshot filled the room, making Nora flinch violently, but it was Holden who staggered, a red stain blossoming on his shoulder as he dropped his weapon with a howl of pain. Ryan stood in the doorway, his revolver still raised. "You all right?" he asked Nora, not taking his eyes off the wounded sheriff. "Yes," she breathed. "I found the evidence, all of it. The land scheme, everything." "Good," Ryan said grimly, "because we're about to have company." Outside, voices were calling out in response to the gunshot. "We need to move." Holden lunged for his fallen weapon, but Ryan stepped forward and delivered a swift kick, sending the gun skittering across the floor. "Don't make me shoot you again," he warned. Nora grabbed the portfolio and moved to Ryan's side. "What now?" "Now we get this evidence to someone who can use it properly," Ryan replied, backing toward the rear exit and pulling Nora with him. "Judge Thornton in Cedar Ridge, he's straight as they come. Once he sees these papers, Holden and his conspirators won't stand a chance." They slipped out the back door, just as townspeople began to gather at the front of the bank. Ryan led Nora through back alleys to where they'd left their horses. "Mount up quickly," he urged. "We've got a hard ride ahead." As they galloped out of town, shots rang out behind them. Holden's deputies, no doubt, alerted to their escape. Ryan led them off the main road and into rough country where pursuit would be difficult. They rode hard for hours, stopping only when the horses needed rest. By nightfall, they were deep in the mountains, following trails that Ryan seemed to know by heart. "We'll make camp here," he finally announced, guiding them into a secluded canyon where a small stream provided water. "We should be safe for the night." As Nora dismounted, the events of the day caught up with her. Her legs nearly buckled, and Ryan was instantly at her side, supporting her with a strong arm around her waist. "Easy," he murmured. "You've been braver today than most men I've known." "I was terrified," Nora admitted, allowing herself to lean against him for a moment. "That's what makes it bravery," Ryan replied softly. They made a small fire, careful to keep it low and sheltered to avoid detection. Ryan produced jerky and hardtack from his saddlebags. Not a feast, but welcome nonetheless to Nora's empty stomach. As they ate, Nora explained what she'd discovered in the documents. They were planning to get rich off the railroad coming through, buying up land for pennies on the dollar from people they forced into bankruptcy. "And Harrison got greedy?" Ryan surmised. Nora nodded. "According to Holden, he wanted a bigger share, threatened to expose them if he didn't get it. So they killed him and framed you," Ryan said grimly. "A perfect solution to both problems." "Why did you really help me?" Nora asked suddenly. There must be more to it than just seeing someone leave the bank that night. Ryan was quiet for so long that Nora thought he might not answer. Finally he said, "The innocent man I watched hang the one I told you about. His name was Patrick Davenport." Nora stared at him, stunned. "My Uncle Patrick? The one who went to Texas years ago?" Ryan nodded slowly. "When I saw your name in the wanted poster, I knew it couldn't be coincidence. I had to know if you were related, had to help, if you were." "They told us he died in an accident," Nora whispered, tears welling in her eyes. "My father never spoke of how. The powerful men who wanted him gone didn't want the real story getting out," Ryan explained gently. "I tried to save him, failed. When I saw another Davenport facing the same fate," he shook his head. "I couldn't fail again." "You didn't fail," Nora said firmly, reaching out to grasp his hand. "You saved me, and now we have a chance to bring justice not just for me, but for Uncle Patrick too." Ryan's fingers tightened around hers. In the flickering firelight, she could see emotion raw on his face, guilt, determination, and something else, something warmer that made her heart beat faster. "We should get some rest," he said at last, reluctantly releasing her hand. "Cedar Ridge is still a day's ride away." They set out at first light, keeping to less traveled paths to avoid potential pursuit. The day was clear but cool, with a breeze that carried the scent of pine and distant snow from the higher elevations. "Tell me about your ranch," Nora said, as they rode side by side along a ridge offering sweeping views of the valley below. "How long have you had it?" 3 years, Ryan replied. "After I left the Rangers, I drifted for a while. Then I found that valley and something just felt right about it." "It's a beautiful place," Nora said sincerely. "Peaceful. It can be lonely," Ryan admitted. "Miguel's good company, but he has family in a settlement about 20 miles south. Visits them often." Nora glanced at him, noting the contemplative look on his face. "You never married?" "Never found the right woman," Ryan said simply. "Or maybe I never stayed in one place long enough to look properly." He turned in the saddle to face her. "What about you? No sweetheart back in Silver Creek?" Nora shook her head. "I've been too busy helping Thomas run the store since Father died. Not much time for courting." She smiled wryly. "Besides, most men don't appreciate a woman who speaks her mind as freely as I do." "Their loss," Ryan remarked, the corner of his mouth lifting in a half-smile that transformed his serious face. They reached Cedar Ridge by mid-afternoon the following day. It was larger than Silver Creek, with a proper courthouse standing prominently on the main street. Ryan led them directly there, tying their horses at the hitching post outside. "Judge Thornton should be in session today," he explained as they climbed the steps. "Once he sees these documents, he'll issue warrants for Holden and the others immediately." The courtroom was in session, as Ryan had predicted. They slipped into seats at the back, waiting for proceedings to conclude. Judge Thornton was an imposing figure with silver hair and piercing eyes that seemed to miss nothing. When court adjourned, Ryan approached the bench, Nora following with the portfolio clutched tightly in her hands. "Your Honor," Ryan began, "I need to speak with you on a matter of urgent justice." The judge peered at them over his spectacles. "Mr. Irving, isn't it? The former ranger?" "Yes, sir," Ryan confirmed, surprised to be remembered. "I never forget a face, especially one that stood up against corruption in the territorial courts." The judge gestured to his chambers. "Come, tell me what brings you here." For the next hour, Ryan and Nora laid out the entire story: Harrison's murder, Nora's framing, the land scheme, and Holden's confession. The judge examined the documents carefully, his expression growing progressively grimmer. "This is indeed damning evidence," he said finally, setting down the last paper. "I'll issue arrest warrants immediately for Sheriff Holden and all others implicated in these documents." He turned to Nora. "As for you, Miss Davenport, consider all charges against you suspended pending a full investigation. I'll send telegrams to ensure you're no longer pursued as a fugitive." Relief washed over Nora like a wave. "Thank you, Your Honor." "No, thank you both for your courage in bringing this to light," the judge replied solemnly. "Too many in positions of power believe themselves above the law. It takes brave citizens to prove otherwise." As they left the courthouse, Nora felt as though a great weight had been lifted from her shoulders. The bright afternoon sun seemed more beautiful than any she could remember. "What now?" she asked, turning to Ryan as they stood on the courthouse steps. "That depends on you," he replied. "You're free to return to Silver Creek, to your brother and your father's store." The thought held little appeal for Nora. "There's nothing for me there now. Too many memories, too many people who were quick to believe the worst of me." "Then perhaps," Ryan said carefully, "you might consider another option." "What's that?" "Come back to the ranch with me." The words came out in a rush, as though he'd been holding them back. "Not just to hide anymore. To stay, if you wanted to." Nora looked up at him, seeing uncertainty in his usually confident expression. "Are you asking me to be your housekeeper, Mr. Irving?" she asked, a teasing note in her voice. "No," he said seriously. "I'm asking you to consider a future there, with me." He took her hands in his. "I know it's sudden. We've only known each other a few days. But sometimes—" He paused, searching for words. "Sometimes you just know when something's right." Nora felt her heart swell with emotion. The connection between them had grown rapidly in their days together, forged in danger and built on mutual respect. What had begun as protection had transformed into something deeper, something with the potential to last. "I'd like that," she said softly, "to see where this might lead." Ryan's face broke into a genuine smile, the first full smile she'd seen from him. "We'll take it slow," he promised. "Get to know each other properly, and if you ever decide the ranch isn't where you want to be, I'll understand." "And if I decide it is?" Nora asked, stepping closer to him. In answer, Ryan bent his head and kissed her gently at first, then with growing certainty as Nora responded, her hands moving to his shoulders. When they parted, Nora was breathless. "I think we should telegram my brother from here," she said. "Let him know I'm safe and where I'll be. And then we go home," Nora replied simply. The journey back to Ryan's ranch took 2 days, during which they spoke freely of their pasts, their hopes, and the future they might build together. They learned each other's stories, Ryan's childhood in Texas, Nora's dreams of someday writing the novels she'd secretly been working on for years. Miguel greeted them with obvious relief when they arrived. "I was worried, senorita. There are rumors all over about arrests in Silver Creek." "Justice is being served," Ryan told him, helping Nora down from her horse. "And Miss Davenport will be staying with us, permanently, I hope." Miguel's weathered face broke into a knowing smile. "See, I thought this might happen. The cabin needs a woman's touch, no?" In the months that followed, Nora did indeed bring changes to the small ranch. She planted flower gardens around the cabin, expanded the vegetable plot, and converted the small back room into a space where she could write. Ryan taught her to ride properly, to shoot with accuracy, and the basics of ranch management. Her brother Thomas visited once, bringing her personal belongings from Silver Creek. He was dubious about her new life at first, but seeing her happiness and Ryan's obvious devotion eased his concerns. Judge Thornton kept his word. Sheriff Holden and 5 other conspirators were arrested, tried, and convicted of murder and fraud. The story made headlines across the territory, with several newspapers praising the brave young woman and former lawman who had exposed the corruption. On a crisp autumn evening, almost exactly a year after Nora had fled for her life, she sat with Ryan on the porch of their cabin, watching the sunset paint the mountains gold. His arm was around her shoulders, her head resting against him in comfortable familiarity. "I've been thinking," Ryan said, his voice rumbling pleasantly against her ear. "A dangerous pastime," Nora teased, looking up at him. "Perhaps." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small box. "But I've been thinking that a year is long enough to be sure of what I want." He opened the box to reveal a simple gold ring with a small diamond. "And what I want is you, Nora Davenport, as my wife." Tears sprang to Nora's eyes as she took in the ring, then the earnest expression on the face of the man she'd come to love so deeply. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I will marry you, Ryan Irving." He slipped the ring onto her finger, then drew her close for a kiss that held all the promise of their future together. "From fugitive to rancher's wife," Nora mused when they parted. "Not the future I ever imagined." "The best journeys are the unexpected ones," Ryan replied, stroking her cheek tenderly. They were married 2 weeks later in a simple ceremony at the ranch, with Judge Thornton himself traveling from Cedar Ridge to officiate. Miguel and Thomas stood as witnesses, along with a few neighbors Ryan had befriended over the years. As spring arrived the following year, bringing new life to the valley, Nora discovered she was with child. Ryan's joy was boundless, his protective instincts growing even stronger as Nora's condition became apparent. "What shall we name the baby?" Nora asked one evening as they sat by the fire, Ryan's hand resting gently on her growing belly. "If it's a boy, perhaps Patrick," Ryan suggested softly. "To honor your uncle." Nora covered his hand with hers, deeply touched. "And if it's a girl, Hope," Ryan decided after a moment's thought, "because that's what you brought back into my life." Their daughter Hope was born on a clear winter morning, with dark hair like her father's and eyes that would eventually settle into the same warm brown as her mother's. She was joined 2 years later by a brother, Patrick, completing their family. The ranch prospered under their joint care. Ryan's natural skill with horses and Nora's head for business proved a formidable combination. They added more land, more cattle, and built a larger home as their children grew. Nora's writing flourished as well. Her first novel, A Tale of Justice and Redemption, set against the backdrop of the Western Territories, found a publisher in Denver and modest success among readers. Ryan proudly displayed a copy in their parlor, showing it to anyone who visited. On the 5th anniversary of their first meeting, Ryan surprised Nora with a special gift, a silver locket containing miniature portraits of their children on one side and a tiny scrap of paper on the other. "What's this?" Nora asked, squinting at the paper. "The wanted poster," Ryan explained with a smile. "The one that first told me about a brave woman accused of a murder she didn't commit. The one that led me to you." Nora laughed, shaking her head in wonder. "Most husbands give their wives flowers or jewelry for anniversaries." "We've never been like most people," Ryan pointed out, drawing her into his arms. "And I wouldn't want it any other way." As they stood together on their porch, watching their children play in the yard with Miguel's grandchildren who were visiting, Nora reflected on the strange twist of fate that had brought her here. A sheriff's terrible mistake, a cowboy's promise of protection, and a journey that had led not just to justice, but to love, family, and a life richer than she could have imagined. "I never thought I'd be grateful for being accused of murder," she murmured against Ryan's chest. "And I never thought I'd be grateful for insomnia," he replied with a chuckle. "If I hadn't been awake to see that figure leaving the bank, then we never would have met," Nora finished, "and all of this would never have been." Ryan tipped her face up to his blue eyes as warm and steady as they had been that first day by the stream. "I'd have found you somehow," he said with quiet certainty. "Some things are just meant to be." And as the sun set behind the mountains they both loved, Nora knew with absolute certainty that he was right.